Airports have a way of stripping people down to their rawest selves. The stress, the crowds, the ticking clocks, it all brings out who someone really is. I didn't know it then, but the moment I stepped into gate C27 with my service dog at my side, I was about to see entitlement in its purest form. My dog, Atlas, walked close to my left leg, his harness snug and clearly marked service dog. Do not distract. He was a 3-year-old German shepherd with calm amber eyes and the steady discipline of a professional. Atlas wasn't a pet. He was medical equipment with a heartbeat. I needed him. 3 years earlier, a roadside accident had left me with nerve damage and unpredictable fainting spells. Most days I looked fine, normal, but Atlas could detect the subtle changes in my breathing and posture long before I felt them myself. He had saved me more times than I could count. This flight mattered. I was traveling from Denver to Atlanta for a specialist appointment I'd waited months to secure. Missing it wasn't an option. We arrived early as always. I checked in, confirmed Atlas paperwork, medical forms, airline approval, DOT compliance, and boarded during pre-boarding without issue. The gate agent smiled, crouched slightly to greet Atlas without touching him, and waved us through. So far, so good. Inside the plane, I located our seats. 12A for me, floor space in front, exactly as arranged. Atlas curled neatly at my feet, tucking himself so perfectly that you'd barely notice him unless you were looking. I exhaled, tension easing from my shoulders. That's when I heard her. Oh no, absolutely not. The voice was sharp, indignant, and loud enough to turn heads 3 rows up. I looked up slowly. She stood in the aisle, mid-40s, meticulously styled hair, oversized sunglasses, still on despite being indoors. Her designer handbag bumped against the seat as she pointed directly at Atlas. I did not pay for first-row economy to sit next to a dog. A flight attendant paused beside her. Ma'am, that is a service animal. The passenger is fully compliant. I don't care, the woman snapped. I have allergies. Severe ones. That dog cannot be here. Atlas didn't move. He didn't react. He just stayed pressed against my leg, calm and steady. I spoke before the attendant could respond. He's hypoallergenic trained, and he's medical equipment. He's allowed to be here. The woman's eyes flicked to me, scanning, evaluating. You don't look disabled, she said flatly. The words hit harder than I expected. I assure you, I replied evenly. My medical history doesn't need to meet your approval. A few passengers nearby shifted uncomfortably. The flight attendant cleared her throat. Ma'am, she said to the woman, if you have a documented allergy, we can reseat you. The woman's face flushed. Why should I move? The dog should be moved. Or put in cargo. Several people gasped. One man muttered, unbelievable. Atlas added just slightly, sensing the tension. I placed a hand on his back, feeling the warmth and steadiness ground me. In not moving, I said quietly, that's when she crossed the line. She leaned forward and pointed at the empty seat beside me. That seat is for people. My son needs space. I blinked. Your son? She gestured toward a boy about 10 years old, slouched 2 rows back, earbuds in, glued to a tablet. He hadn't even looked up. He has sensory issues, she added quickly. He needs extra room. I looked at the empty seat. Then you should have booked 2 seats. Her jaw tightened. This is discrimination, she said loudly. I'm calling someone. She fumbled for her phone. The flight attendant's voice sharpened. Ma'am, please put your phone away. We're preparing for departure. I am not sitting down until that dog is moved. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom moments later, announcing a brief delay. Murmurs rippled through the cabin. I felt Atlas press closer to my leg. My heart rate ticked up. Not from fear, but from the familiar warning signs he was trained to detect. I took a slow breath. The woman noticed. Oh, what now? She scoffed. Is the dog going to attack me? No, I said. He's alerting. Alerting to what? To the fact that you're stressing me into a medical episode. That shut her up for about half a second. Then she laughed. Wow, so now I'm responsible for your problems? Before I could respond, she turned to the flight attendant again. Either you remove that animal, or I'll file a complaint. I know my rights. I'm part of my HOA board. We deal with this kind of thing all the time. Of course she was. The flight attendant took a measured breath. Ma'am, your HOA authority does not extend to federal aviation law. A ripple of suppressed laughter passed through the rows. The woman's face darkened. Unacceptable. I want a supervisor. At that moment, Atlas shifted sharply and nudged my knee, firm, deliberate. That was his signal. I swallowed. I need water, I said. Now. The flight attendant reacted instantly, kneeling beside me. Sir, are you okay? I will be, I said, focusing on Atlas' steady presence. Just need a minute. The woman stepped back, as if I were contagious. This is ridiculous. You're delaying the entire plane. Another passenger spoke up, a woman across the aisle. You're the only one causing a problem. Mind your business, the woman snapped. It is my business when you're bullying a disabled passenger, the woman shot back. The cabin buzzed with tension now. Phones were out. People were watching. The flight attendant stood and spoke, clearly. Ma'am, you need to take your seat immediately, or we will escalate this. Fine, she said coldly, but this isn't over. She dropped into her seat, arms crossed, glaring at Atlas like had personally insulted her. I closed my eyes, breathing slowly until the dizziness passed. Atlas stayed perfectly still, his presence anchoring me back to center. As the plane finally pushed back from the gate, I felt the weight of the woman's stare burning into the side of my face. I had a feeling this wasn't going to end at landing. And I was right. Very, very right. By the time the boarding door closed, I could feel the tension in my shoulders like a knot pulled too tight. My service dog, Atlas, lay calmly at my feet, his golden brown coat neatly brushed, his vest snug against his broad chest. The patch on it read Service Dog. Medical alert in clear block letters. He didn't move, didn't whine, didn't even flick an ear as passengers shuffled past. Atlas had been trained for moments exactly like this. Crowded, noisy, stressful moments when my body might fail me before I realized it myself. My son Noah sat beside me, his small hand wrapped around the strap of his backpack like it was a lifeline. At 9 years old, had already endured more hospital rooms and 4 drips than most adults ever would. Leukemia had stolen his childhood once, and though he was in remission now, the meds he carried were non-negotiable. Atlas was part of that safety net. Dad, Noah whispered, leaning closer. Is she still staring? I didn't need to look to know who he meant. Yes, I murmured. But don't worry about her. Just breathe. Across the aisle, Karen sat rigidly in her first-class seat. One shed managed to snag despite boarding late, her lips pressed into a thin line, eyes locked on Atlas like he was a personal insult. She was the kind of woman who believed rules existed for everyone else, and exceptions were owed to her. Designer handbag clutched on her lap, perfectly styled blonde hair, a red holiday sweater screaming festive entitlement. The seatbelt sign chimed on. A flight attendant, Maya, walked down the aisle, checking belts and offering polite smiles. When she reached us, she paused and glanced at Atlas approvingly. Good boy, she said softly. Everything okay here? Yes, thank you, I replied. Karen cleared her throat loudly. No, it's not okay, she snapped. That dog is taking up a seat. Maya turned slowly. Ma'am, service animals do not require seats. They remain on the floor at their handler's feet. That's disgusting, Karen scoffed. I paid extra for legroom. I shouldn't have to look at a dog the entire flight. Atlas didn't react. Noah stiffened beside me. He's a medical service dog, I said calmly, and he's not bothering you. Karen laughed sharply. Everyone claims that. You people always have an excuse. Maya's smile faded, replaced with a professional firmness. Ma'am, the dog is compliant and approved. There's no issue. Karen leaned forward, lowering her voice, but not enough. Either that dog moves, or it'll make this flight very unpleasant for everyone. I felt my jaw tighten. The plane began to taxi. For a few blissful minutes, Karen said nothing. I allowed myself to hope that maybe, just maybe, Shed decided to let it go. Then Atlas shifted. Not much. Just enough to press closer to my leg. His head lifted slightly, his nose brushing my knee. That was my warning. Before I could react, Karen stood up abruptly, ignoring the seatbelt sign. That's it, she snapped. I'm not sitting next to an animal. Maya rushed back. Ma'am, please return to your seat. No, Karen said loudly, pointing at Atlas. He's in my space. Move him. Put him in cargo. Or give me his seat. There it was. The demand. My heart started pounding. Not from fear, but from the familiar edge of an episode creeping in. Atlas sensed it immediately. He nudged my thigh harder, grounding me. No, I said, my voice steady despite the spike of adrenaline. He stays. Karen's eyes flicked to Noah. Something ugly flashed there. Your kid doesn't need a dog, she sneered. He looks fine. Noah's grip on his backpack tightened. That crossed a line. He has cancer, I said quietly, and this dog helps keep him alive. The cabin went silent. For a moment, Karen looked unsettled. Then her face hardened. People lie about that all the time, she said. I know your type. Always looking for sympathy. Maya's voice sharpened. Ma'am, that is enough. You need to sit down now. Instead, Karen reached down. She grabbed Atlas' vest. It happened so fast Noah screamed before I even processed it. Hey! I shouted, lunging forward. Atlas let out a low, controlled growl. Not aggressive, just a warning. His training was impeccable, even under threat. Karen yelped and recoiled like she'd been burned. He attacked me. She shrieked. That dog attacked me. Maya slammed the call button overhead. Captain to cabin. Immediately. Passengers were filming now. Whispers rippled through the rows. Noah was crying, clutching Atlas' fur. I wrapped an arm around him, heart hammering so hard I thought I might pass out. 2 more flight attendants arrived, followed by the lead purser, a tall man with a no-nonsense expression. What's going on? He asked. She tried to bite me. Karen cried. They need to remove that animal. Now. That's a lie, someone across the aisle said. She grabbed the dog. Another passenger nodded. We all saw it. The purser looked at Atlas, calm, sitting perfectly still, and then at Karen, who was shaking with rage rather than fear. Ma'am, he said evenly. Did you touch the service animal? Karen hesitated. Well, I had to defend myself. That's a yes, he replied. Maya added, Sir, this dog is registered and behaving appropriately. The handler has documentation. The purser exhaled, slowly. Captain has been informed. Karen's confidence wavered. Good, because I want them removed. Instead, the captain's voice crackled over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we are pausing departure due to a disturbance in the cabin. Please remain seated. Karen's eyes widened. What are you doing? She demanded. The purser leaned closer. Ma'am, interfering with a service animal and causing a disturbance is a federal offense. Her face went pale. That's ridiculous. Is it? He replied. Moments later, the plane stopped moving entirely. And then came the words no one expected to hear mid-flight. Federal agents are en route to the aircraft. Karen laughed nervously. This is absurd. I didn't do anything illegal. I said nothing. I was too busy calming Noah, too busy trusting Atlas as he pressed against us, steady as a heartbeat. Within minutes, the cabin door reopened. 2 men in dark jackets stepped inside. FBI, one announced. The silence was absolute. Karen's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again, and for the first time since boarding, she looked truly afraid. By the time the plane leveled off at cruising altitude, the cabin felt heavier than it had during takeoff, not because of turbulence, but because of tension. My service dog, Atlas, lay calmly at my feet, his tawny coat neatly tucked into the space ID paid for and been explicitly approved to use. His vest, navy blue, with bright white lettering reading Medical Service Dog, was secure, his leash wrapped once around my wrist the way my trainer had taught me. Atlas' breathing was slow and steady, a grounding rhythm that mirrored the rise and fall of my own chest. Across the aisle, Karen sat stiffly in her seat, arms crossed so tightly her knuckles were pale. Her lips were pressed into a thin, furious line, eyes darting between Atlas, the flight attendants, and me, as if waiting for someone to validate her outrage. She didn't get that validation. Not yet. The lead flight attendant, a composed woman named Denise, had handled the initial confrontation professionally. She had verified Atlas' paperwork, confirmed his training credentials, and politely but firmly told Karen that the seat was not up for negotiation. Still, Karen hadn't let it go. She never did. 10 minutes after the seatbelt sign turned off, the call button above Karen's seat chimed. Then chimed again. And again. Denise appeared at her side, her expression calm but alert. "How can I help you, ma'am?" Karen leaned forward, lowering her voice in a way that was meant to sound reasonable, but dripped with condescension. "I'm highly allergic to dogs. I shouldn't be forced to sit next to one. This is a safety issue." Denise nodded. "I understand your concern. However, you were offered an alternate seat before departure, which you declined. Atlas is a registered service animal, and he's behaving exactly as trained." Karen scoffed. "That's what she says," she snapped, pointing at me without looking. "People lie all the time just to get their pets on planes." My jaw tightened, but Atlas shifted slightly, pressing his shoulder against my leg, a silent reminder to stay calm. Denise's tone hardened, just a touch. "Ma'am, this conversation is over. Please use your call button only for legitimate needs." Karen leaned back, eyes flashing. "This isn't over," she muttered. I believed her. The first hour passed quietly, but my unease didn't fade. Atlas remained vigilant, occasionally lifting his head to scan the aisle before settling again. His ears flicked when Karen moved, when the drink cart rattled by, when a child laughed 2 rows back. He wasn't nervous. He was alert, and Atlas was only that alert when something was wrong. About 90 minutes into the flight, Karen stood up abruptly. She didn't head toward the restroom. Instead, she stopped directly beside Atlas. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice low but firm. She smiled thinly, "Just stretching my legs." Before I could react, she leaned down and reached toward Atlas' harness. "Don't touch him," I said sharply, pulling the leash closer. She recoiled theatrically. "Oh my God. See? Aggressive." He lunged at me. Atlas hadn't moved. Not an inch. Several passengers turned. A man in the row ahead frowned. He didn't lunge. I was watching. Karen ignored him. She raised her voice. "This animal is a danger. I demand he be removed immediately." Denise was there in seconds, joined by another flight attendant. "Ma'am, step back to your seat now." Karen pointed at Atlas. "That thing is threatening me." Denise looked at Atlas, who was sitting calmly, eyes soft, tail still. Then she looked back at Karen. "Ma'am, false claims of aggressive behavior are taken very seriously. Please sit down." Karen's face flushed. "You can't talk to me like that." "Yes," Denise replied evenly. "I can." Karen huffed and returned to her seat, muttering under her breath. I could feel eyes on me, some sympathetic, some curious, but I kept my focus on Atlas, rubbing the familiar spot behind his ear that always calmed us both. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. The real trouble began during drink service. I was adjusting Atlas' position slightly, making sure his tail wasn't in the aisle, when I noticed Karen leaning over her tray table, rummaging through her oversized purse. She glanced at me once, then quickly looked away. Something about it made my stomach drop. Before I could react, she stood again, this time holding a small plastic container. I knew it. She announced loudly, "Dog treats." I froze. Those weren't treats. They were Atlas emergency glucose tabs, clearly labeled prescribed and vital. I recognized the container instantly. "How did you get those?" I demanded. Karen smirked. "You dropped them. And I don't feel safe with unknown substances around an animal." My heart started racing. "Give those back. Right now." She shook her head. "I'm calling security when we land. These could be drugs." Atlas stood up. Not aggressively, protectively. He positioned himself between Karen and me, his body tense but controlled, exactly as trained. A low, warning huff escaped his chest. Karen screamed. "That's it," she yelled. "I'm being threatened. This dog needs to be restrained." Passengers erupted in chatter. Someone shouted for a flight attendant. Denise sprinted down the aisle, eyes locking on the container in Karen's hand. "Ma'am," Denise said sharply, "what is that?" "Contraband," Karen snapped. Denise took it, reading the label. Her eyes widened. "These are medical supplies." "Yes," I said, my voice shaking now. "And she stole them." Karen opened her mouth to argue, but Denise held up a hand. "Return to your seat. Now." Karen hesitated. "You're taking her side?" "I'm enforcing federal law," Denise replied. "Interfering with a service animal or its medical equipment is a serious offense." Karen's bravado faltered. I was just trying to protect myself." Denise didn't respond. She turned and spoke quietly into the intercom near the galley. I caught only a few words. "Captain. Interference. Service animal. Possible federal violation." My pulse thundered. Atlas leaned back against my leg, grounding me again, his presence steady and reassuring. Whatever happened next, he had done his job perfectly. Minutes later, the captain's voice came over the PA. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've had a situation arise in the cabin. For safety and security reasons, we will be coordinating with authorities upon landing. Please remain seated and follow crew instructions." Karen's face went white. She sank into her seat, eyes darting around the cabin as murmurs spread like wildfire. Someone behind me whispered, "What did she do?" I didn't answer. I just rested my hand on Atlas' back, feeling the steady beat of his heart under my palm. For the first time since boarding, I wasn't afraid. Karen was, and we still had several hours left in the air. As the plane continued forward, I knew something fundamental had shifted. This was no longer about a seat or entitlement or even ignorance. Karen had crossed a line that couldn't be smoothed over with excuses or complaints. She had interfered with a service dog. She had stolen medical supplies. And now, the consequences were catching up. Fast. Atlas settled back down at my feet, calm as ever, while Karen sat rigid and silent across the aisle. The sky outside was clear, but inside the cabin, a storm had already broken, and it wasn't done yet. The cabin felt different after the confrontation. Not quieter. Planes are never truly quiet, but calmer, like the tension had finally leaked out through a cracked window. The flight attendants moved with renewed confidence. Passengers settled back into their seats, and the soft hum of the engines returned to being just background noise instead of a drum roll for disaster. My service dog, Atlas, lay at my feet exactly where had been the entire flight, head resting on his paws, eyes half-lidded but alert. His amber vest was still perfectly aligned, the service dog, do not distract patch visible to anyone who bothered to look. I ran my fingers lightly along his shoulder. A grounding habit. He shifted just enough to press his weight into my leg, his way of saying "I'm here." Across the aisle, the empty seat, where Karen had been sat like a silent verdict. She hadn't been arrested mid-flight, despite the dramatic expectations of a few nearby passengers. But the head flight attendant had escorted her to the back of the plane, informed her she'd be meeting airport security upon landing, and warned her, very clearly, that her behavior would be documented and forwarded to both the airline and federal authorities. And that was enough, because Karen finally understood something she hadn't before. This wasn't an HOA meeting. There were no intimidation tactics that worked at 35,000 feet. The rest of the flight passed without incident. A few passengers leaned over to whisper words of support. "You handled that really well," a middle-aged man in the window seat across from me said softly. "Your dog is incredible," a college-aged woman added. "So calm." I smiled politely, nodding, but didn't say much. I was tired, not physically, but emotionally. Encounters like that always left a residue, a faint ache of having to justify my existence, my needs, my right to occupy space. Atlas didn't need justification. He simply was. When the captain announced our descent, the cabin buzzed with movement. Tray tables clicked back into place, seatbelts tightened, overhead bins reopened briefly as people checked their belongings. Atlas shifted smoothly into his landing position, bracing himself the way he'd been trained to do. I leaned down, whispering praise. "Good boy. Almost there." As the wheels touched the runway with a firm thump, applause broke out, something that always surprised me, but never failed to lift the mood. We taxied for several minutes before stopping at the gate. That's when the real consequences arrived. 2 uniformed officers and an airline security supervisor boarded before anyone was allowed to deplane. Their eyes scanned the cabin with calm efficiency. The head flight attendant met them halfway down the aisle and gestured discreetly toward the rear. Karen stood slowly when they reached her row. Gone was the defiance. Gone was the sharp voice and pointed finger. She looked smaller now, shoulders hunched, lips pressed tight, eyes darting as if searching for an exit that didn't exist. As they spoke to her, she gestured wildly at first, clearly trying to explain, to justify, but whatever she said didn't help. One of the officers asked for her ID. The supervisor took notes on a tablet. When they escorted her off the plane, she didn't look at anyone, not even me. After they left, the captain's voice came over the intercom again, calm, measured. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. You are now clear to deplane. We appreciate your cooperation." The aisle filled quickly. People passed us slowly, many offering smiles, nods, or quiet words of encouragement. "You did nothing wrong," someone said. "Thank you for standing your ground," said another. I swallowed, the knot in my chest loosening just a little. When it was our turn, I clipped Atlas' leash securely and stood. He rose with me in perfect sync, ready to guide. As we stepped into the jet bridge, the head flight attendant caught up to us. "I just wanted to say," she said, lowering her voice, "I'm sorry you had to deal with that. And thank you for your patience." "Thank you for handling it," I replied honestly. She smiled at Atlas. "He's an excellent partner." "He really is," I said. The terminal was bright and busy, the smell of coffee and polished floors grounding me back in the real world. As we walked toward baggage claim, Atlas guiding me through the crowd with effortless precision, my phone buzzed. A message from my sister. "Saw the news alert about a disturbance on your flight. Please tell me that wasn't you." I chuckled softly and typed back. "It was, but we're okay. Karma handled the rest." Later, sitting in the quiet of my hotel room, I replayed the day in my head, not with anger, with clarity. People like Karen didn't really want seats or space or rules. They wanted control. They wanted the world to bend around their discomfort, even if it meant breaking someone else in the process. But sometimes the world didn't bend. Sometimes it held firm. And sometimes all it took was one calm service dog, one firm flight attendant, and one refusal to